Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville, your host. Tonight is August 29th, 2016, and we're going to be discussing a number of different issues. Of course, the Turkish invasion of Syria will be one of our biggest discussion points tonight, because we've got to discuss who is behind this, why, and what the repercussions will be for the future. I also want to touch on a few domestic policy issues. We want to talk about moving forward, some of our strategic goals, and we'll look into that. We want to talk about the FDA crackdown on supplements as well. But before we do, I want to remind you that you can catch Truth on the Tracks here every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here at ucy.tv. You can access the show's personal website at ucy.tv/TT for Truth on the Tracks. And on that site, you'll find the links to my more recent articles, the YouTube videos, the archives, etc. You'll find all that stuff. Now, if you're interested in my work, I would encourage you to follow it as it comes out at activistpost.com, eraofwisdom.org, and naturalblaze.com. If you're interested in my work specifically, then please, I highly encourage you to go to brandonturbeville.com. That is the website where I repost all of my work. This is sort of the hub of my work and activism. All the articles are posted there, all the archive versions of the show, the other interviews that I do, all of that are posted right there on the site. And, of course, the links to the social media, the Twitter feed, and the free book, The Difference It Makes, 36 Reasons Why Hillary Clinton Should Never Be President, is now available. And, of course, Hillary Clinton has recently gone on a meltdown tour. She was on national TV where she's discussing the alt-right, where she accuses it of being, anti-American, racist, of having a dark heart. I believe she accused Alex Jones of having a dark heart because he said that 9/11 was an inside job and questioned the Sandy Hook attacks. Well, this is coming from a woman who not only perpetrated a war, not one, but two wars, one in Libya, one in Syria, and, of course, her tacit support for every other war, her vote for Iraq, and a number of other military adventures. This woman who oversaw the war in Libya, the murder of Muammar Gaddafi, in a brutal fashion, direct result of what she did. And then she goes on national TV and says, we came, we saw, he died, and cackled like the psychotic witch that she is, yet she claims that Alex Jones has a black heart. Well, how can you take any moral advice from a woman so vile as Hillary Clinton? And, of course, we don't. Hillary Clinton is the opposite of morality. If you ever want to know what you should do in the time of trial, look at what Hillary would do and do otherwise, because that is, if you want to take the moral track, you can look at, there's scarcely a single thing this woman has done that has not been in the service of the oligarchy, and she always can cover it up by being a victim of sexism or some other kind of ism, or the vast right-wing conspiracy that now includes not only the right-wing media, the Republican Party, the Congress, the FBI, but it also includes Vladimir Putin and the Russians. They're against her too, and WikiLeaks, and Anonymous. Everybody is against Hillary Clinton. Haven't you heard? The entire world is allied against Hillary Clinton, yet still she remains strong. That's why you should support her, ladies and gentlemen, because she's just out there for you, sacrificing herself for the American people against the Soviet Union, even though it collapsed in 1990. She's against the Soviet Union. The communists. Don't want to be a communist, do you? You don't want to be a commie agent, do you? Where's McCarthy to back Hillary Clinton up? Oh my God, this woman is vile and disgusting, and she should never get anywhere near the White House. She shouldn't even be allowed in an office to begin with. She's incapable of functioning in basic society, right? She shouldn't even be bagging someone's groceries. She's too dangerous. So she needs to be dealt with. Now, and of course, well, we'll pick up with Hillary in a bit because we got to talk about the Syria situation, and we'll get to her coronation and such later on. Now, back on August 22nd, this is before the Turkish invasion. We had, the end of a period of time where the situation in Syria looked to be improving. Right, there was improvement on the ground in terms of military strategy with the Russian bombing, the Syrian bombing, the encirclement of Aleppo. But then there was an escalation in tensions as the United States rushed to protect their Kurd proxies in the northern part of Syria, demanding that the Syrian government stop bombing operations against these SDF fanatics. Now, the United States, of course, has violated international law. They violated Syria's national sovereignty, not only funding and supporting proxy soldiers so they could destroy the Assad government, but also by deploying aircraft and troops into the country, despite not being invited in by the legitimate government. The United States has not been invited in. Russia has. It's a big difference. So the U.S. is now warning Russia and Syria against targeting terrorists and the West's proxy fighters inside Syria, in Syria's own territory. We have the new U.S. commander of American troops in Iraq and Syria stating on August 22nd that he will defend the Special Forces, the Special Operations Forces, Special Forces basically, is aggressively deployed by the United States to northern Syria. So he's saying if Syrian warplanes or if Syrian artillery strikes take place again where U.S. troops are located, then the United States will respond. We had an interview with Lieutenant General Stephen Townsend with CNN saying from his headquarters in Baghdad that, quote, "We've informed the Russians where we're at. They tell us they've informed the Syrians, and I just say that we will defend ourselves if we feel threatened," end quote. So the hypocrisy and deception of the U.S. government on this issue is now reaching another level, yet another higher level. So basically what we have Townsend saying, and it will give you a translation of what Townsend is saying. He's saying we funded proxy terrorists to destroy the Syrian government, and those terrorists started losing, so we deployed troops to support them and forged new brigades of terrorism with Kurds. And despite the fact that we deployed these troops against international law, and we violated Syria's national sovereignty, as well as the wishes of the majority of the world, we will play the victim if those troops are injured during the course of Syria's battle with the terrorists we support. We will then attack Syrian planes as a response to attacking terrorists whom our soldiers are assisting in attacking the Syrian government. In other words, the U.S. position is we will attack you whenever we want, however we want, and everyone and everything else in the world be damned. And if you dare respond, we will play the victim, drum up sympathy and good old-fashioned American patriotism back home so that we can launch a full-scale war upon Syria. And this is exactly what would happen. Imagine if Syria were to drop bombs on America's terrorists, and one of the Special Forces troops who were not invited, who were not wanted, and who are there operating in support of the West's bearded freaks, if one of these soldiers is killed, can you imagine? There will not be a single person inside the borders of the United States that doesn't see that soldier's face, doesn't hear about how much he loved his children, how much he petted his dog, how much he cared for his ailing mother, and now he was murdered by the brutal dictator Assad, personally, of course, with a blunt object. This is the level of propaganda that we'll get. And then everyone will see this soldier's face, and then within minutes, America will be chomping at the bit to go spread some more democracy and freedom that's left every other country that it's touched in a pile of rubble and savagery that hasn't been seen for centuries. This is what we are witnessing. So Syria now is being threatened with full-scale war if it defends itself by bombing the terrorists, or the death of 1,000 cuts if it doesn't. This is an epic level of hypocrisy, even for the U.S. government. But I think the most surprising element, not that this is being done, is that it's being carried out so openly. So we've got Western audiences now. Either they're so befuddled to foreign policy that overt acts of aggression and deception just go unnoticed, or they just don't see it, period, right? But of course, then we had the British, and they've never been known to take a back seat to hypocrisy. So we have 30 Labour MPs now calling for safe zones in Syria, and this is an obvious and admitted act of war that would initiate Libya 2.0. Right? This pro-war camp in Britain was playing up the spirit of Joe Cox. Remember the MP, the humanitarian bomber and warmonger who was murdered earlier this year, and then paraded about on television as if she were an angel and she cared about children and she cared about women and she cared about everybody except the ones that she wanted to bomb. The campaign now to create safe zones and buffer zones in Syria is being promoted not only by the war hawks in Parliament, but also by these friends of Joe Cox and of course, the UK military establishment, the same military establishment that threatened a coup if Jeremy Corbyn became Prime Minister. And this is John Woodstock, who's a friend of Joe Cox. In life, Joe argued with such passion and eloquence that the UK armed forces could play a role in protecting civilians in Syria by enforcing a no-bomb zone. This is a time for Britain to show the courage and resolve which Joe herself exemplified by taking bolder action to end the horrific bloodshed, end quote. So, we give you a translation again. A warmongering member of Parliament was murdered, so let's pretend to honor her by ensuring that the people she wanted to murder while she was still alive are murdered now that she's dead. That's essentially what they're saying. This is poor logic. It's a pretty poor presentation in my view, but unfortunately this is the type of propaganda that is effective in the modern day UK. Is as susceptible to stupidity and bad propaganda as Americans are, although it is a quieter form. The former shadow minister, Pat McFadden, also chimed in. He says, quote, "The British contribution to attacking ISIS strongholds, in which our pilots do everything they can to avoid civilian casualties, is an important part of the effort to free the people of Syria from the brutality of what they have been enduring. The whole approach to Syria has been marked by a reluctance to intervene, but telling ourselves that because we didn't break it, we didn't buy it, is of little comfort to the innocent victims of the war," end quote. So let me give you a translation of former shadow minister Pat McFadden. "We've been bombing intermittently for some time, and that's good, but we should also just go all in. To hell with civilian casualties, to hell with international law. In fact, to hell with our own population are going to pay the price in not only the blood and sacrifice, but the lower living standards back home." That's essentially the translation. Now, of course, we've got the UK military voice that's chiming in as well. Colonel Hamish de Bretton-Gordon. He says, "There is a military solution here, and now is the time to be bold. We aren't talking about boots on the ground. The very least we can do is place no-bomb zones around hospitals." It's funny how everybody starts using the word no-bomb zone all at the same time, isn't it? "As the Russian government has strenuously denied that they target hospitals, there should, in theory, be little danger of the nightmare scenario of a British or U.S. jet shooting down a Russian one. I have suggested creating a safe zone for civilians to go in the northwest Syria and protect it. Otherwise, they will remain and die in Aleppo or leave and turn right to Raqqa, where we could see them turn to ISIL. The very least we can do is place no-bomb zones around hospitals," end quote. So, let's translate that as well. This is what the UK military colonel Hamish de Bretton-Gordon is really saying. He's saying, we have to destroy the Syrian government. I think we can do this, without starting thermonuclear World War III, but it's just a chance we're going to have to take. Let's create a safe zone that's, in effect, a refuge for terrorists and an excuse to bomb the Syrian Air Force out of existence. And we can use hospitals and civilians as excuses. And if the nuclear world war happens, we'll know we made the wrong decision. That's basically what he's saying, right? And what is the stupidity about civilians turning to ISIL, Turning to ISIL? You mean turning into them? Or turning into ISIL for support? Last time I checked, civilians run away from ISIL, jackass. That's where I see that on the media every time. You want to know where they're at in Aleppo? You want to know where they're running from in Aleppo? They're running from your precious rebels. The Syrian people are running to government-held territory in Aleppo. That's where they're running from. They're running to, is government-held territory. So if Assad was such a brutal dictator, that doesn't seem like the logical choice for the Syrian people to take, does it? So according to the Telegraph, now we've got sources close to Hillary Clinton stating that Hillary is planning on a safe zone upon her election. And she is, of course, that's not surprising. Reptillery has long supported every single war. I'll give you props if somebody can email me and show me one war this woman did not support since being First Lady. I can't find any. I've looked up all the wars, and that includes the ones that didn't actually happen, but people tried to promote, like John McCain when he wanted to go in and bomb Iran. She was right along with him, by the way. She said we had to obliterate Iran, and that she wanted the Iranians to know it. You cannot be anti-war and vote for Hillary Clinton and support Hillary Clinton. That is a contradiction. But I digress. The idea of establishing a safe zone, well, that's not a new concept. In July 2015, the agreement, an agreement that was being discussed would have effectively created what they were calling then a buffer zone, and that would have spanned from the Turkish border into Syria. It would have extended from Jarablus in the east to Azaz or Afrin in the west, and as far south as Al-Bab. And the width of the zone would have been about 68 miles and would have went about 40 miles deep into Syria, right on the doorstep of Aleppo, basically. That zone would have been much smaller than the one which Turkey and the U.S. had been calling for in the years prior, because they wanted essentially half of the country at one point, necessarily stretch the length of the Turkey-Syria border. But that's a start. That's the point. True to form, the U.S. and Turkey have attempted to obfuscate the fact that their agreement was the creation of a no-fly zone, because at the time they simply renamed it an ISIL-free zone. And this is the same tactic that was used when the term no-fly zone and buffer zone began to draw too much ire from observers a year or so ago, 2 years ago. So then the term became safe zone. So we have semantics serving NATO and the United States well over the years. Remember, we could change torture into enhanced interrogation, and it becomes legal simply because of semantics. Now, the simple name change of a terrorist organization that has made the Anglo-American powers able to produce moderate rebels and the most frightening terrorist organization the world has ever seen, while using the same group of terrorists. So it's the same people, but on one hand you can call them moderates, on the other hand you can call them ISIS, scary ISIS. So the description of the ISIL free zone in 2015 was that it was going to be distinguished in an area in which the Turkish and the U.S. military would engage in aggressive operations against ISIS. It was floated that this area would also have to function as a place where civilians who were displaced by the crisis might be able to run to for safe haven, and where, of course, the moderate rebel forces can maintain a higher presence, free from the battles with ISIS that they're allegedly fighting. And, of course, there is some infighting. We've got the Washington Post saying, once the area is cleared, the plan is to give control to as yet unidentified moderate Syrian rebels. The United States and Turkey have differing interpretations as to which groups can be defined as moderate. Well, you have to find them first. The reality of all of this is that the ISIL free zone would have been nothing more than a forward operating base that would have served to function as something that a platform, a launching platform deeper into Syria. It's working under the direct protection of the U.S. military and the Turkish military. And that's exactly what the British and the U.S. are arguing for today, shamelessly doing so. Now, we can go further back and talk about the public discussion of a buffer zone that went back at least as far back as 2012, where we had the Brookings Institution in their memo assessing options for regime change. And it says, quote, "An alternative is for diplomatic efforts to focus first on how to end the violence and how to gain humanitarian access, as is being done under Annan's leadership. This may lead to the creation of safe havens and humanitarian corridors, which would have to be backed by limited military power. This would, of course, fall short of U.S. goals for Syria and could preserve Assad in power. From that starting point, however, it is possible that a broad coalition with the appropriate international mandate could add further coercive action to its efforts." End quote. Now, they went further, the Brookings Institution. They described a possible scenario that is very similar to the one that is currently unfolding in Syria, where Turkey, in coordination with Israel, would help overthrow Assad by establishing a multi-front war, which is what they refer to it as, a multi-front war, on Syria's borders. This is, again, the Brookings Institution. Quote, "In addition, Israel's intelligence services have a strong knowledge of Syria as well as assets within the Syrian regime that could be used to subvert the regime's power base and press for Assad's removal. Israel could posture forces on or near the Golan Heights and, in so doing, might divert regime forces from suppressing the opposition. This posture may conjure fears in the Assad regime of a multi-front war, particularly if Turkey is willing to do the same on its border and if the Syrian opposition is being fed a steady diet of arms and training. Such a mobilization could perhaps persuade Syria's military leadership to oust Assad in order to preserve itself. Advocates argue this additional pressure could tip the balance against Assad inside Syria if other forces were aligned properly." Now, end quote. The establishment of a no-fly zone, that is tantamount to the declaration of war. And we've even got admissions coming from top U.S. generals explaining exactly what a no-fly zone would look like. We have General Carter Ham. He says, "We should make no bones about it. It first entails killing a lot of people and destroying the Syrian air defenses and those people who are manning those systems. And then it entails destroying the Syrian Air Force, preferably on the ground, in the air if necessary. This is a violent combat action that results in lots of casualties and increased risk to our own personnel." End quote. We also should quote General Philip Breedlove, where he says, quote, "I know it sounds stark, but what I always tell people when they talk to me about a no-fly zone is, it's basically to start a war with that country because you are going to have to go in and kinetically take out their air defense capability." Now, end quote from him, we need to move to where we are at now, and that is the Turkish invasion of Syria. On Wednesday morning, we had Turkey launching an all-out military assault on Syria. It sent in tanks, troops, airstrikes, in concert with airstrikes from the United States, to the northern portions of Syria near the Turkish-Syrian border under the guise of fighting ISIS. The fighting seems, or at least at the time, was focused around Jarablus, right? And remember what we just went over in the discussions we had from the Brookings Institution and other think tanks and so forth. So the BBC says a dozen Turkish tanks and other vehicles have rolled across Syria, across the Syrian border after heavy shelling of an area held by so-called Islamic State. Military sources told Turkish media 70 targets in the Jarablus area have been destroyed by artillery and rocket strikes and 12 by airstrikes, end quote. And we've also got Al-Masdar reporting early on about the progress of the Turkish military offensive, saying, quote, "The Turkish special forces alongside the Free Syrian Army and Failaq al-Sham reportedly captured their first village during this new offensive dubbed Operation Euphrates Shield." According to Failaq al-Sham's official media wing, their forces captured the village of Tal Khatijla After the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham terrorists quickly abandoned the area in order to reinforce Jarablus. ISIS has mostly abandoned the small area between Jarablus and the Turkish border, leaving only small units to resist the advancing Turkish-backed rebels. The Turkish-backed rebels are now attacking the hilltop village of Tal Shair, which is along the road to Jarablus. Now, the question is, what is Turkey doing? Most of what I just read in terms of the reports coincides with what we have been predicting here on Truth on the Tracks and at BrandonTurbeville.com for some time. But let's talk about what Turkey's doing. The Turkish invasion is predicated on the basis of fighting ISIS, right? That is wholly unbelievable, since Turkey itself has been supporting and training and facilitating ISIS since day one. Not only that, but Turkey is arriving in Syria with terrorists in tow. The BBC reported again between 9 and 12 tanks crossed the frontier, following by pickup trucks believed to be carrying hundreds of fighters from Turkish-backed factions of the rebel Free Syrian Army. Now, if Turkey was interested in stopping terrorism, why would they lead the charges for more terrorists to enter Syria? If Turkey's goal was stopping terrorism, it's capable of sealing the border from its own side without any need for invasion. So why the war party, right? And again, why would they lead the charge and bring in more terrorists to Syria if they were interested in stopping terrorists? Now, Turkey's interests do not lie in stopping terrorism. Far from it. Turkey's foreign policy and military decision to invade Syria are based along three lines, right? Its desire for more territory, which it believes was stolen from it long ago, the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Its willingness to continue working with NATO in its attempt to destroy the Syrian government, and of course the concern over Kurdish expansion. With this invasion, Turkey appears to have solidified its willingness to risk outright war with Syria and perhaps even Russia in order to fulfill the goals of NATO and Anglo-American powers who have sought to destroy Syria from the beginning. Now, part of this strategy is the creation of the buffer zones and safe zones in the north, which we just discussed, right? And these are the concepts that have been around since at least 2012. They picked back up in 2015, and now they were recently refloated and discussed by the United States and the UK only days before this invasion took place. Everything that we just discussed, the MPs in the UK, etc., this came out just days before the invasion of Syria by Turkey. Now, note that the invasion and the operations are centering around Jarablus, right? This is the eastern border. Remember, what did we just talk about? The eastern border of this famous Jarablus corridor, right? Bordered by Afrin and Azaz in the west, and southern borders of it in being around Al-Bab. This is the last fully functioning terrorist supply route coming in from Turkey. These were precisely the dimensions that were discussed by Western think tanks and NGOs in regards to what a safe zone in Syria should look like. Now, although that they are producing the argument that says that safe zones would be giving civilians somewhere to go, the zones were supposed to be controlled by moderate Western-backed terrorists and were clearly designed to prevent the Syrian government and Russian forces from closing the supply routes coming from the Turkish side of the border into Syria. This safe haven is also a way for the neo-Ottoman Erdogan to lay claim to more territory in order to placate his dream of becoming the 21st century equivalent of the leader of the Turkish Empire. At the very least, this desire for more land under the Turkish flag is going to lead to a situation similar to that of the Golan Heights, which is Israel has illegally occupied for decades, but there's still frequent threat of military action and controversy constantly. Now, Erdogan is incredibly concerned about the growing Kurdish movement also, but the one inside Turkey and inside Syria. And with the Kurds gaining more and more territory in the north of Syria, in large part because of the support being given by the United States, as well as Kurds in Iraq. becoming more and more willing to work with the YPG Kurds in Syria due to American influence, and growing interest of dissent and military operations inside Turkey by the PKK, Erdogan is undoubtedly concerned that the Kurds could decide to unite and initiate a massive campaign for autonomy and independence, or at the very least, inspire Turkish Kurds to launch a revolution. Now, there are other interests involved here as well. Some are suggesting, and we've got a very different set of opinions now developing in the geopolitical research community, and we'll take a look at some of these opinions. And some of these individuals, by the way, I have very much respect for some of the individuals on both sides here. So whatever side turns out to be correct in this situation, of course, shouldn't reflect poorly on the other, because these are all fine individuals who are discussing this. But we will take a look and try to make some sense of what we can find of their commentary. Now, some of these researchers are suggesting that Turkey is getting off the reservation and simply acting on its own interests, meaning rolling back the Kurds. And Erdogan has long acted in that way, right? He is an unstable guy. But he's also long acted as a major tool of the NATO agenda against Syria. Long been a tool. So the very fact that the United States is aiding the Turkish operation with airstrikes of its own should go some length in demonstrating that the NATO powers are in full support of the military incursion. But others have a different perspective, right? We have Andrew Korybko of Katon website, KATEHON.org, I believe, or maybe .com, but fine website, check it out. And he argues that the Syrians, the Iranians, and the Russians are tacitly supporting the incursion because it alleviates them of the responsibility of cleansing ISIS and Kurdish battalions from northern Syria. He is saying, and he points to increased political talks between Syria and Turkey in recent days, as well as the domestic climate of Russia in terms of support for increased military operations. To back up his case, he suggests that the U.S. has been duped by Turkey and that it's falling in line with the incursion, which is reality and agreement on strategy and policies related to Syria by the multipolar bloc. In other words, he is suggesting that Putin has once again pulled the wool over Obama's eyes, right? He's got Turkey coming into Syria, destroying ISIS, rolling back some of the Kurds, and then making the United States do it too, right? This is what essentially he's arguing. Now, if you'll bear with me, I would like to read part of what Korybko has to say here. He says, Damascus and Ankara have been engaged in secret talks for months now in the Algerian capital of Algiers, as has been repeatedly confirmed by many multiple media sources ever since this spring. Moreover, Turkey just dispatched one of its deputy intelligence chiefs to Damascus a few days ago to meet with his high-level Syrian counterparts, so this might explain the reason why Russia and Iran aren't condemning Turkey's incursion into Syria, nor why the Syrian officials aren't loudly protesting against it either. More and more, the evidence is pointing to Turkey's operation being part of a larger move that was coordinated in advance with Syria, Russia, and Iran. Nevertheless, for domestic political reasons within both Syria and Turkey, neither side is expected to admit having coordinated any of this, and it's likely that bellicose rhetoric might be belched from Ankara just as much as it's predictable that Damascus will rightfully speak about the protection of its sovereignty. What's most important, though, isn't to listen so much to Turkey and Syria, but to watch and observe what Russia and Iran say and do, since these are the two countries most capable of defending Syria from any legitimate aggression against its territory, and which have been firmly standing behind it for years now, albeit to differing qualitative extents, though with complementary synergy, i.e. Russia's anti-terrorist air operation and Iran's Special Forces Ground 1. This isn't in any way to excuse, apologize for, or explain away the U.S. opportunistic and illegal inadvertent contribution to this coordinated multipolar campaign, but to accurately document how and why it decided to involve itself in this superficially Turkish-led venture, namely because it was cleverly misled by Erdogan into thinking that this is a precondition for normalization of relations between both sides. Russia lacks the political will to cleanse the Wahhabi terrorists and Kurdish separatists from northern Syria itself, and for as much as one may support or condemn this, it's a statement of fact that must be taken into account when analyzing and forecasting events. With this obvious constraint being a major factor influencing the state of affairs in Syria, it's reasonable then that Syria, Russia, Iran wouldn't vocally object to too much to Turkey tricking the U.S. into doing this instead of out of the pursuit of its own interests vis-a-vis the attempted normalization with Ankara. The major qualifying variable that must be mentioned at this point is that serious Russian and Iranian condemnation of Turkey's ongoing operation would signal that something either went wrong with their multilaterally coordinated plan or that Turkey was just a backstabbing pro-American Trojan horse this entire time, and the skepticism surrounding Moscow and Tehran's dedicated efforts to coax Ankara into a multipolar pivot was fully vindicated as the correct analysis all along. So, end quote. Karibko puts out a lot of good points there. He makes a lot of good points in regards to this situation. But still, with all of that in mind, you've got to remember that Washington has essentially led Erdogan by the nose through most of the Syrian crisis. Only recently has Erdogan shown any signs of moving away from U.S. influence, but even those apparent moves now are being questioned by researchers and analysts. At this point, we still don't definitively know if the United States was behind the coup, or if it was an inside job type of false flag staged by Erdogan and the U.S. together in order to justify a clampdown on Erdogan's opponents. Judging by the fact that no diplomatic staff has been recalled from Turkey or from the U.S., that Incirlik continues to be used by the United States, and that now we have joint military operations taking place between the U.S. and Turkey, it's difficult to believe that Turkey truly believes the U.S. was behind an attempted coup against Erdogan. Regardless, Turkish incursions into Syria on the basis of a false flag, while being supported by the West at the same time, that's nothing new, because remember 2014, we had Turkey exposed for planning to use an alleged attack on the tomb of Süleyman Shah, as well as a false flag attack on Turkish territory in order to justify an invasion of Syria. The International Business Times, they have an article, Turkey YouTube ban, full transcript of leaked Syria war conversation between Erdogan officials. And in this article, they released the transcript of a conversation between members of Turkish leadership planning a false flag using terrorist proxies in order to justify an invasion. We have Ahmet Davutoglu saying, Prime Minister said that in current conjuncture, this attack on Süleyman Shah tomb must be seen as an opportunity for us. Then Hakan Fidan, I'll send 4 men from Syria if that's what it takes. I'll make up a cause of war by ordering a missile attack on Turkey. We can also prepare an attack on Süleyman Shah tomb if necessary. And then we have Feridun Sinirlioglu saying, our national security has become a common, cheap domestic policy outfit. And Yasar Guler saying, it's a direct cause of war. I mean, what we're going to do is a direct cause of war. That's what some of the transcript said. Now there's more, which is as incriminating as what we just read. But we have to take that for what it's worth in context of the fact that this recent Turkish invasion into Syria took place right after another opportunity took place, right? This was a terrorist attack. We have Saturday night at a Kurdish wedding in Gaziantep. It was a Turkish town near the Syrian border. It was one of the deadliest in a string of terrorist attacks that have taken place in Turkey. Right? Since June 2015, Kurdish militants, Islamic State militants, have had 15 attacks across Turkey. 330 people have been killed. Some of them are questionable. Some of the attacks are questionable. Some of it seems to be connected to the Turkish intelligence agencies and the Turkish military. But regardless, we had this terrorist attack at a Kurdish wedding that killed a number of people. And then on Wednesday, we see the invasion. So is this the type of opportunity that was being discussed in 2014, but and justified a border incursion, but not a full-scale invasion as to what we see right now? Now, with all of that in mind, we have an article from the New Atlas, and it's a great new website, the New Atlas. Please go check that out. It's a great geopolitical website, and it tends to lean toward the direction in which I'm leaning toward, which is that this invasion is part of the NATO goal of destroying the Syrian government. Right? It's I'll go ahead and read what the New Atlas has to say. Thus, Turkey's government and the complicit Western media have helped place the blame equally on both the Islamic State and Kurdish militants ahead of the now ongoing cross-border operation. The above-mentioned BBC article will also note, Turkey has vowed to completely cleanse Islamic State from its border region, blaming the group for a bomb attack on a wedding that killed at least 54 people in Gaziantep on Saturday. In the aftermath of the July coup, many were hopeful Turkey would realign itself geopolitically and play a more constructive and stabilizing role in the region. Instead, while citing the threat of Islamic State and Kurdish forces along its border, a threat that its own collusion with U.S. and Persian Gulf states since 2011 helped create, Turkey has decisively helped move forward a crucial part of U.S. plans to dismember Syria and move its campaign of North African and Middle Eastern destabilization onward and outward. The response by Syria and its allies in the wake of Turkey's cross-border foray has so far been muted. What, if any, actions could be taken to prevent the U.S. and its allies from achieving their plans remain to be seen. While the toppling of the government in Damascus looks unlikely at the moment, the balkanization of Syria was a secondary objective only ever considered by U.S. policymakers as a mere stopgap until eventually toppling Damascus as well. Conceding eastern parts of northern Syria to U.S.-led aggression will only buy time. So, that is the direction in which I'm leading. And we've already talked about the possibility of buffer zones and no-fly zones. And, of course, we talked in the past about the creation of a federalized Syria, where you have a Kurdish zone, a Druze zone, a Sunni stan, Shia stan, Alawite stan, all of these different stans out of Syria. It's a fractionalization. It's the Brzezinski method of microstates and mini-states. Now, again, my position on this Turkey invasion is not that it's coordinated with Russia or the multipolar bloc. My position is that it's coordinated with the United States to create a safe zone. And only time will tell to see if we're right and correct on this. But that is what I can see right now. This is indeed the creation of a safe zone in northern Syria. So we will also see what the response will be as well. Now, last week I ended the show trying to get people to get active about the FDA. We need all hands on deck for this one. This is an action alert. This is what I need all the listeners to do, not just the ones, of course, who've contacted me and who are working with me and trying to promote some of these 43 points that I've talked about. Again, go read the article on the right side of the website, A Real New Deal for America, 43 points, to get an idea. So before we get on to the FDA, I want to put out the call that if you haven't listened in the last few weeks, I have initiated a call to action to any and all people who are willing to work with me to promote the ideas that are found in my 43 points article. Now, if you look at that article, go pull it up and look at it. You don't have to agree with every single point. We can work together with people who don't necessarily agree with us. If you don't agree with me on economics, but you agree with me on the drug war, then send me an email and tell me, I want to work with you on the drug war, but not perhaps the economic platform. That's fine. We'll work together on what we agree on, and then we'll argue about the other stuff later. We are inclusive here. So please send me an email, anticodex@yahoo.com. Tell me that you want to help out. We've got a tremendous amount of response to the last call to action that I put out. It was amazing. We've got people now working in 2 continents and 3 countries, and we'll say a large majority. We'll say a majority of the states in the United States, people are working to try and promote these ideas. And I can give you more information about that if you send me an email at anticodex@yahoo.com. And I won't ask you to do anything that you don't feel comfortable doing. If you don't like public speaking, I won't ask you to do that. If you're not a good writer, I won't ask you to do that. But I will ask you to take some time. And of course, we understand that people have to live their lives, so this is not a full-time job that we're asking you to commit to. Is if you're passionate about making a positive change in the world, then please contact me, and we'll do what we can. Our window of opportunity is closing, and we have to get as active as possible. Hillary Clinton is going to be president in 2017, ladies and gentlemen. That is frightening. And if we don't start fighting back now, then it's going to be too far gone. So that's why I'm asking you to contact me, and we'll try to put everything together as easy as possible, streamlined as possible, and then get you working on these various issues. But now this issue with the FDA, this is something that is for everybody, and this is something that everybody can do. Again, we need all hands on deck for this one. We have the Alliance for Natural Health USA has its highest level action alert possible. This may be considered one of the worst attacks on natural health supplements since the early 1990s. In 2011, the FDA created a revision of how the supplement industry could comply with the Dietary Health and Education Act of 1984, DSHEA, right? And DSHEA had successfully replaced an act that would have blocked consumer rights in a major way and tightly restricted natural supplements. So essentially, DSHEA, for whatever it is, DSHEA is not the greatest thing in the world, but for what it is the reason why we can enjoy consumer access to natural health products of all these different types that we have. Now, according to a lot of natural health advocacy groups, the FDA's 2011 revisions were a thinly veiled reversal of the consumer rights that were so hard to keep to begin with. In other words, it was an attempt to block the natural health industry and clamp down on consumer access again. And after some outcry, the FDA went back to revise, and now this is the draft that we've been waiting to see. Unfortunately, aside from a couple crumbs of improvement, the draft appears to reverse the relative freedom of consumer and industry under DSHEA. And it's already appears to be incredibly confusing. This is what the Alliance for Natural Health USA has to say about it. They say, over the last few years, one of the biggest issues facing the supplement industry has been the confusion over how to comply with the new dietary ingredient provisions contained in the landmark Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, the main law governing supplements. For the layman, new dietary ingredient is usually just government jargon for new supplement. Under DSHEA, any dietary supplement introduced to the market in the U.S. after 1994 is considered new, an NDI, and the manufacturer must notify the FDA at least 75 days in advance of the marketing the product. In 2011, the 2011 draft put forth by the FDA's approach on how, this is in quote, I'm not quoting Alliance for Natural Health, but the 2011 draft put forth by the FDA's approach on how companies should comply with DSHEA's NDI requirements, meaning how and when an NDI notification should be submitted, what info is required, what is an NDI, among other things. And with the draft, the Alliance for Natural Health is providing some startling information, right? They're quite upset about this. They say the requirements for new supplements, even within the same company, are so rigorous as to break that company. Furthermore, it appears that the companies can easily be run out by Big Pharma. So does this mean that we can say goodbye to Amazon orders or a short visit to a health food store? This is possibly what we're going to be seeing here. This is what Alliance for Natural Health says. It is a little better in some respects, but the biggest problems remain. It represents a dire threat to the supplement industry and, by extension, consumer access to supplements. The guidance imposes safety requirements on new supplements that are not even expected of drugs. The FDA describes how to determine what kind of safety studies to submit with an NDI notification. Are other drugs, even dangerous antipsychotics, antidepressants, and stimulants, subject to similar requirements when they are used on children? The answer is a resounding no. In the FDA's own words, most drugs prescribed for children have not been tested in children. The same is true for use with elderly people. Remember that an NDI refers to a new drug. IND refers to a new drug, while an NDI refers to a new supplement. Under current law, if an IND application is filed for an ingredient, that is, an ingredient being studied for use as a part of a new drug, that ingredient can no longer be produced or included in a supplement if an NDI has not been previously accepted. This has already happened to pyridoxamine, a form of vitamin B6, even though in the end it resulted in this valuable form of B6 being no longer available either as a supplement or a drug. Apparently the FDA couldn't care less that this form of natural B6 is no longer available in any form. Indeed, it has been considering a petition to ban the only remaining natural form of B6, the most important of all, because all B6, synthetic or natural, must be converted to it in order for our bodies to use it. The 2011 draft guidance threatened to cripple, if not eliminate, the supplement industry. An economic analysis at the time from an Emory University professor estimated that the FDA's outrageous interpretation of the DSHEA-mandated NDI notification language would have meant the elimination of tens of thousands of supplements from the market, an industry-wide cost of between $2 billion and $165 billion in animal and human product safety studies to comply with the FDA's NDI notification protocols, and the loss of between 55,270 and 104,475 jobs in the supplement industry. The language apparently stifles innovations. We'll move back. Let me go back. The ANH, Alliance for Natural Health USA, says that any enterprising drug company can corner the market on a whole list of ingredients to keep them out of the hands of the supplement formulators forever. End quote. So, innovations that might be, have been and might be coming along down the pike are now going to be stifled because of the language of this policy change. And the fact it's been 22 years and there's been numerous manufacturing innovations since DSHEA. The ANH, Alliance for Natural Health, feels that the true aim is to destroy the supplement industry, and it does appear to be an attack on them in that way. Despite the fact that probiotics like acidophilus, for instance, are scientifically proven to treat at least 18 conditions, probiotics are on the chopping block, right? The FDA has cited risks. Coincidentally, now that the importance of the gut microbiome for healing is out of the scientific bag, after a nation of people have had their guts destroyed with doctor-prescribed antibiotics and fast food and GMOs, the FDA wants to crack down on probiotics. Of course it does. So the Alliance for Natural Health, of course, is aware of that. They point out the coincidence. They also point out that Big Pharma has developed its own probiotics, which could lead to subjection to costly prescription services, having to get permission from your authority, your daddy, meaning your doctor, and then having to pay exorbitant fees like EpiPen, and then perhaps you might only be able to get the prescription type of probiotics. In case, if that's the case, then none of this was really coincidental at all. Now, is it? So if you want to know more and stay afloat on the issue, you need to go over to the Alliance for Natural Health USA website. That is www.anh-usa.org. and there are some backslashes. So just try anh-usa.org. It's already clear that the FDA is confusing the text and confusing people on what the supplement industry can or can't do. As A&H says, it's clear that the FDA cannot credibly oversee the supplement industry. The bias toward Big Pharma is unparalleled, and we must have, they're saying that we need another body to provide oversight. And then there is the A&H USA's website. Again, there's a take action option. But it is also important that you contact your congressmen and your senators. And we're talking about U.S. senators, House of Representatives, U.S. House of Representatives, and the FDA in order to protest the revised guidelines and offer your comments on that. Now, in the article that's up at BrandonTurbeville.com and NaturalBlaze.com, alert FDA attempting to halt creation of new supplements. This is by Heather Callahan, posted on August 16th, 2016. There is at the bottom of that article the opportunity for you to take a look at the sample emails and sample letters that you could write and send to the senators and representatives. It's not very difficult to do, to go look up who your representatives are, who your senators are. If you don't know that, then you should definitely know that. And this would be a learning experience for you. Contact them. Just send them an email. It doesn't even have to be a very long email, and tell them that you want to express your discontent with the new revised guidelines, and that you want it to go back to the way it was with the Shia. And it can be very simple. You can do that from your computer. You don't have to put yourself out there in order to do it. And I constantly run across people who are telling me, for whatever reason, that they're afraid to put themselves out there, even for something like this. And I have to say, if this is the type of fear that you live in a daily basis, then I don't know what else you'd have to worry about. You've done to yourself what the system would have wanted to do to you anyway, but couldn't, and so you've done it yourself. So send the damn email. Just go click on, it's literally the least you can do. Find out who your senators and representatives are, get their emails up, send them a short email, and go on about your day and feel like you've accomplished something and done something, at least even if the worst happens, that you tried. And that is all we're asking. So next week we are going to be discussing, of course, some more solutions. And we will be talking about some domestic policy issues, of course, following the Syrian crisis as well. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville, your host. We'll see you next week.